Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley and our online worship for February 28th, 2021. My name is Reverend Dr. Julie Kane, and thank you for joining us today. Our service will be the last in this month's Worship and Covenant Group theme of friendship. It is called A Change of Heart, and we will be exploring how relationships, our interdependence with one another, make up much more of our own identities than we usually notice. We will look at how we are changed by one another when our hearts meet in friendship and mutuality, and how this kind of interaction is at the heart of our Unitarian Universalist faith, based not in a common doctrine of beliefs, but in the act of choosing to walk together in an ongoing search for truth and meaning. This past week of the COVID-19 pandemic, we reached yet another tragic milestone. 500,000 reported deaths in the United States due to the coronavirus. But in fact, there are countless more deaths than those reported, likely related to COVID. And of course, on top of this huge number of deaths, this is just the tip of an iceberg compared to all of the millions and millions of lives that have been personally touched and adversely affected by the pandemic in so many ways. In this prolonged time of quarantine, going on a full year now, when we're physically separated from so many of our loved ones, families, and communities, we have been seeing with new eyes just how relationships are vitally important to us. The connections that keep us going through this uncharted territory of 2020 and 2021, even as they support us from a distance. Our opening words are by George Odell. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone. We need one another in the hour of success when we look for someone to share our triumphs. We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again. We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the entire congregation, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. I'm Abby Darkangelis, your worship associate for today's service. We gather together with our doubts as well as our convictions, with our fears and our hopes, with our failures and aspirations, with our sorrows and our joys. Whether you are joining us today for the first time or you have been a member or friend for many years, we are glad you are here. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, whatever your background, whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived here, you are welcome. And now, as Robert Hurt comes forward, let us all say together from our homes the words for lighting our chalice. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, to share. And I invite you to join with me as we say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help our neighbor. To these ends we covenant one with another.
And before we proceed to the rest of our service, as we have done every week since this pandemic began, I ask that you join with me in a period of silence. Today, in remembrance and grief for more than 500,000 lives lost, and the many more continuing to suffer as a result of the virus. In today's silence, we also want to lift up the people of Texas who are recovering from a devastating winter storm, and especially in light of the failure of their power grid to help them through it. Please join me now in the silence. May we find the comfort, compassion, and courage that we all need to face these troubling times together. Amen. Our words for meditation today come to us from a local colleague, Wayne Arneson, Unitarian Universalist minister, retired and living in Charlottesville. O God, you surround us. In you, we have our being. Help us to recognize the love that surrounds us. Help us to see ourselves as the loving people we are and can be. In silence now, we join together, bringing to our mind's eye all the people who love us and continue to love us. People who are not here with us today, but whose love we are carrying with us. Those people who are here with us every day and whose love we sometimes take for granted. And those people who might be within our circle of love, could we extend it a little further? In silence now we join together, holding all of these people in our hearts. And in returning from silence, we ask that our hearts be opened to all whose names and faces have crossed our minds, and that the love that we share with the people in our lives may be our abiding teacher. May it be so.
The words of reflection for today lift up our covenant tradition of Unitarian Universalism and its embrace of the democratic process in our congregations and society at large. There are two short readings, one from our hymnal called Singing in the Living Tradition, and the other from the fairly new reading supplement to the hymnal called Lifting Our Voices. The first reading is found in our gray hymnal. It's number 458 by the Unitarian Universalist minister Walter Royal Jones, Jr. Mindful of truth, ever exceeding our knowledge, and community, ever exceeding our practice, reverently we covenant together, beginning with ourselves as we are, to share the strength of integrity and the heritage of the Spirit in the unending quest for wisdom and love. The second reading from the reading supplement is number 223 by the UU minister and covenant tradition scholar Alice Blair Wesley. We pledge to walk together in the ways of truth and affection, as best we know them now or may learn them in days to come, that we and our children may be fulfilled, and that we may speak to the world in words and actions of peace and goodwill.
Earlier this month, in a service called Behind the Masks, I talked about the ways in which the totality of who we are as a unique person on this planet is comprised of different aspects of ourself, represented sometimes by the masks that we wear in life, the roles we play, and how they shape our sense of who we are. I suggested that beyond all the masks we wear and the multiple aspects or sides of our personalities that step forward and step back according to the situation we may find ourselves, beyond all of that, who we are as an essence is much more than the sum of all these parts. Today, I invite us to take a few minutes to look at how our sense of who we are in life is profoundly shaped by the relationships in our lives that change us. And how, even though we think of ourselves as individuals, really, we share in each other's being more than we know. I actually share my heart with all those who have touched me profoundly in my life. They are part of me, and I offer up part of myself to them through this connection that we share. Now, we can think of how this looks for each of us in the context of our friendships throughout life. Those people who have introduced us to a whole new way of looking at the world, for example, those friends who came to know us in ways we had not been fully known or seen before. This universal human experience of shaping our sense of identity through these primary relationships that we have in our lives is actually at the core of our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. Instead of the ground of our faith being determined, as some other faiths are, in required beliefs or religious doctrines, our faith of Unitarian Universalism is based in the promises we make to one another to walk together, acknowledging our uniqueness and differences, and yet searching together for greater truths and meaning in our lives. We sometimes hear this significant distinction articulated in the phrase, deeds, not creeds. Our faith tradition of Unitarian Universalism has its roots in the early Christian church and the teachings of Jesus. Before church doctrines became formalized, we emerged as a faith community in the Protestant Reformation, when the role of the church, and in particular the authority of priests as an intermediary and translator of God's wisdom and knowledge, was challenged as direct access to the scriptures became widespread through the printing of the Bible for the general public. Unitarian Universalism traces its heritage not just to the Protestant Reformation, but to what is called the Radical Reformation. We were among other Christian faith communities who not only lifted up the right of direct access to the scriptures, but also to full participation and shared leadership in our communities. We have been, over the centuries, moving from a hierarchical model of authority in our faith communities to a democratic model, which recognizes that every person brings an important and new perspective to the table. Out of the Radical Reformation, a new kind of covenant tradition emerged that not only informed a new style of organizing our faith communities, it actually laid the foundation for a democratic process as we formed the new nation of the United States. Instead of required beliefs being codified in required doctrine for religious membership, our tradition of Unitarian Universalism joins with other faiths who affirm that revelation is not sealed. There is no one unified plan of a beginning and an end, and no single entity behind it all determining the outcome of this human experiment. No, along with free will comes an open-ended universe, not predetermined or controlled by an omnipotent God, judging who is in and who is out. In this universe where the only constant is change, the future is not already determined. And what each and every one of us does actually makes a difference in shaping the direction we are on. We have to make our best decisions on what we know, but at the same time be open to what we don't know and have yet to learn. This is why the first reading that Abby shared with us begins with the phrase, mindful of truth ever exceeding our knowledge. And then later, beginning with ourselves as we are. And in the second reading, there was the line, we pledge to walk together in the ways of truth and affection as best we know them now or may learn them in the days to come. Our fate is not sealed. What we do matters. And we have to be open to learning from one another and sharing from our own hearts and minds what we perceive to be true. We need one another more than we know. We are creating our way forward together all the time. This has been called in recent years co-creating. This idea that God knows the universe and itself through us as part of creation, and those very same creative power of God and the universe are part of who we are as human beings with agency for decision making and action, what we know in the term free will. But our individual free will, of course, does not operate in a vacuum. We are influenced by our world and by the people with whom we connect. There is an internet program from the United Kingdom called Turning Toward Life, and each week the hosts Lizzie Wynn and Justin Weiss share conversations about the big questions of meaning in life that we are all facing. I wanted to share with you a comment that was made in episode 177 of their program. They noticed when we discover that we're not really separate from one another, that in a very ordinary way, we are always deeply shaping and affecting one another, then we are also open to new ways that we might be of help to one another and care for one another. We can also find that we can be profound teachers for one another, that we actually learn to see, feel, hear in new ways by the very act of simply being present to each other. In one way, this may sound like common sense, but it is to the degree that we can all relate to it in our everyday lives. For us as Unitarian Universalists, it's a core belief. We affirm not only the inherent worth and dignity of every person, but also that we are part of an interdependent web of life. These two of our 7 principles are actually inseparable. When Martin Luther King Jr. said, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny," he was not only expressing this idea, but was informed by a theological concept of co-creativity that spoke to him from the work of a Unitarian theologian named Henry Nelson Wyman. King did his doctoral dissertation based in the work of theologians Paul Tillich and Henry Nelson Wyman. The Unitarian Henry Nelson Wyman's work at the University of Chicago Divinity School applied the metaphysical philosophy of mathematician Alfred North Whitehead, which he called process philosophy, into theological concept. In a book called Transforming Liberal Congregations for a New Millennium, which provides a background for our trend of shared ministry in UU congregations, the Unitarian Universalist minister Roy Phillips introduces the ideas of Henry Nelson Wyman this way. Wyman asks, what transforms us as we cannot transform ourselves? To save us from self-destructive propensities and to bring us to the highest good of which we are capable. It is found in a certain quality of communication between people. Wyman called this certain kind of communication creative interchange. Creative interchange is a quality of relating in which we encounter one another with openness, respect, and a sense of wonder, not to convince another person of our point of view, but to try to listen deeply and to hear the other's primary experience and perspective. Ultimately, creative interchange is about being open to being transformed and changed within oneself. It is allowing another person's experience to penetrate us and to respond from our own experience rather than reacting by jumping right onto our next point of view. Our hearts are changed in this life as a result of our experiences in the world, and perhaps even more profoundly, the experiences that we share with our life's companions. We who choose to be who we choose to be with in this life is certainly a good part of who we are. As we continue to venture into unknown territory in this ever-changing and ever-challenging world in which we are living, especially during these trying times of the pandemic, who we journey with is of the utmost importance. Therefore, let us be grateful for the good company we keep, including this beloved Unitarian Universalist community, for helping us to find our best way forward and helping us to be all who we are at the deepest and highest levels of our being. May it be so.
I believe in the sun. I believe in the sun, even when it's not shining. I believe in the sun. I believe in the sun, even when it's not shining. I believe in life. I believe in life, even when I don't feel it. I believe in life. I believe in life, even when I don't feel it. I believe in God. I believe in God, even when God is silent.
As Robert Hurt extinguishes the flame, let us say together from our homes the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We hope you will consider making an offering after today's service through our webpage, uushenandoah.org, which allows us to exercise that generosity of spirit for this self-supporting church and its many ministries, which continue while we are not able to be physically together. We invite you to join our church community at noon at our virtual post-service gathering for Joys and Concerns, followed by our coffee hour conversations in smaller breakout groups. The Zoom link is found in your UUCSV email. Thank you for joining us today.
Our closing words are by the poet Anne Hillman. We are all on a journey together to the center of the universe. Look deep into yourself, into another. It is to a center which is everywhere that is the holy journey. First, you need only look, notice, and honor the radiance of everything about you. Play in this universe, tend all these shining things around you, the smallest plant, the creatures and objects in your care. Be gentle and nurture. Listen. As we experience and accept all that we really are, we grow in care. We begin to embrace others as ourselves and learn to live as one among many. Thank you so much for joining us today. Stay safe, stay strong, and we'll see you next time.